Good morning and welcome to our webinar, Introduction to Belbin, Why Team Roles Can Help. My name is John O'Boyle of Belbin Ireland. You're very, very welcome today. I'm going to hand you over to my co-collaborator, Bernard Chaulier, who's going to run through a few technical details.
So thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for signing in for this Introduction to Belbin, Why Team Roles Can Help. Before we start, just a quick overview of the technology. Just want to make sure that everyone can hear us. So what I'm going to do is above your name here, you have a little hand, a question mark, and little arrow. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hand first of all if you can hear us. So just click on that little button and just raise your hand. Okay, Sarah, thank you. Mary, thank you. Charlie, thank you. So it looks like the audio is working, waiting for a few others, but I'm assuming it'll be working if it works for a few people. You can also, during this interactive session, ask questions. So you have that little question button at the bottom. So just putting your questions in there, and you also have a chat function where you can then interact with the facilitators in here. Okay, John, that's it. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. You're very welcome. What we're going to do is just run through the session and how we're going to run it and the topics we cover. If during the time we get questions or anybody has any comments or issues, just note them down and we'll take them and feedback immediately. In the absence of that, this is how we propose to go through the agenda. After the introduction and the agenda, I'm going to talk through Belbin itself and the 9 team roles. These are the roles that are the Belbin team roles. We're going to have a quick look at the profiles, and then I'm going to ask Bernard to look at how teams and teams work in some depth. Finally, we're going to cover accreditation and development, which goes to precisely how you become accredited in Belbin and how, if you're an experienced Belbin practitioner, you might actually increase your professional development path. And then if there are any questions at the end, if we have time, then we'll obviously also deal with those. So assuming that's okay, unless I hear otherwise, at this stage, does anybody have any questions? Okay, I'll start the presentation. My name is John O'Boyle. I've been Sales and Marketing Director of Belbin Ireland since its conception. And my colleague Bernard Chaulier has got very many years' experience in developing and presenting on the Belbin method. Bernard, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, John. Yeah, I guess I've been working at the early stages with Belbin Associates UK and have trained more than 200 people in the global certification in here. So I'm quite familiar with the methodology and obviously use it as a practitioner through team coaching today in general. Okay, John?
Thanks very much. Okay, first of all, the background to Belbin Ireland. Who are Belbin Ireland and why are we running this webinar? Some of you who may already know the system quite well will be aware that Belbin Associates is based in Cambridge in the UK, and they are the family and or people who helped develop the Belbin concept from Dr. Meredith Belbin, who introduced it in Henley Business School in the 80s. During that period of time, they have worked very closely with a number of people in different countries, and we've been proud enough to be associated with them over the last 10 years, as Bernard has said. But as of from September the 1st, 2014, we have been appointed as the sole distributors for Belbin on the island of Ireland, so the North, obviously, and the Republic. And the rationale for that is that having people actively involved here would increase the Belbin presence, would support companies and or coaches who wish to develop their Belbin skills, and provide a real live on-the-ground support service. So we have guidance on how to apply Belbin in situations. We offer practitioner and accreditation training. We offer and sell profiles, reports and support to coaches. We also look at plagiarism and schemes for people using unofficial Belbin materials. Quick word on this. That is, a number of people would have used previous paper-based systems which came out in the 80s and the early 90s. These no longer apply. And it's important to note that if you or anybody you know has paper systems, you should get in contact with us. And we have an upgrade scheme to convert those paper systems into what we call official e-interface 7. I should also add, while I'm on the subject of it, that we're going to go through interface 7. All Belbin profiles should be done electronically, should be conducted electronically, and the feedback given electronically. So it's most important to remember that. Finally, Belbin, as I hope you can see by the end of this session, is not useful just for getting a profile about what people are and what their personality and behavior issues are. It also can be used and should be used in team interventions and consulting so that people can see the methodology in action. Okay, a little bit about the team roles. Meredith Belbin, as I said in the previous slide, defines a team role as a tendency to behave, contribute, and interrelate with others in a certain way. It is, in fact, a well-proven model for understanding people. When you consider that 80% of our actions in business can be driven by experience or past, but 20% can be brought down to performance and behavior. Behavior is perhaps the secret ingredient that often isn't known, and yet it can be a key determinant in how people perform themselves. So the team roles look at how people behave in a certain way. And that behavior, in our view and in his view, contributes to the way that they interact in most business and indeed non-business situations. There are 9 team roles, and I'm going to run through them in a little bit of detail. You'll see on the left-hand side that there is the name of the role plus a little symbol. And as well as the little symbol, we also talk about how they contribute. So if you like the plus side of the coin, what people tend to be like to have this role, and also what we describe as the allowable weaknesses. So if somebody is very strong in one role, they will tend, and I stress tend, to potentially contribute in a certain way and also may have certain weaknesses. To go through them in a little bit of depth, the first role here is the plant role, signified by the light switch moment. And plants tend to be creative, free-thinking, and idea generation. Sometimes, however, they can get so excited about these ideas that the actual process of executing them and making them happen can be things that are less important in their mindset. So they might ignore an incidental and may be very preoccupied. The second role is the resource investigator, signified the telephone. Resource investigators tend to be outgoing, enthusiastic, and explore opportunities outside the business. So they may find that their focus is on how other people do things and how people can be tapped up for information to help. Sometimes this can lead to excess enthusiasm and a great sense of over-optimism. And if that enthusiasm isn't meted through in the way that the business develops, they can lose interest. The third is the coordinator, and the coordinator, you can see, is characterized by the conductor symbol, because that's probably the best way of viewing a coordinator. The orchestra is conducted by them. They're mature, they're confident, they understand people's goals, and they delegate effectively. One allowable weakness, however, of coordinators is because they delegate, they can often see themselves as offloading parts of the work that are difficult and that they're not really reluctant to do. So they can be seen by some people in difficult circumstances as being slightly manipulative. The fourth role is the shaper, and the shaper cracks the whip, hence the use of the whip as the analogy for the shaper. Shapers tend to be dynamic, driven by pressure, have an overwhelming desire to succeed, and really don't see obstacles. If obstacles there, they're to be driven over. This can make them hugely positive and hugely dynamic for the growth of the business. But it can mean occasionally that they will offend or they will provoke because they are completely and totally determined to see that things are done. This can also mean that they want things done their way, may not often understand what people's opinions are or even bother to listen to them. The fifth role is the monitor evaluator, and the monitor evaluator is signified by the I. A monitor evaluator, in simple terms, looks at things from several different angles and looks at things with a discerning eye, sometimes actually with a critical eye. What they're trying to do is to view everything from a very different perspective and see what the pros and cons of doing something are. One of the weaknesses of a monitor evaluator can be that people find them uninspiring and that they can be seen to be overly critical. They can always see the negative in things, though from their perspective what they're doing is exercising a bit of due caution to make certain that people look at everything from every perspective before rushing to judgment. The sixth team role is that of the team worker, and the sign there is of hands being held. This is the diplomat. This is the person who's cooperative, who will listen and will try to avert friction. Sometimes the downside of a team worker role is that they can be indecisive, be afraid to confront. They could be so anxious to get a resolution to an issue that they're prepared to settle for less than perhaps what might be needed in a certain situation. On the other hand, most teams that have a very good and solid team worker tend to rub along well together, even if some of the other members of the group can find others irritating or frankly non-performing. The seventh team role is the implementer, and that's signified by the cogs in the machine. This is the person that keeps things going. In a crisis, in a difficulty, you can rely on that person to turn and make the machine work. Ideas are turned into organized roles that needs to be done and needs to be followed up. They're practical and they're reliable. However, on the other hand, they can be somewhat inflexible. The system and the process is the central part for these people, and sometimes they can find it difficult to look outside the potential processes to try and look at new ways of doing things. The eighth team role is the completer finisher, and that's signified by the person tightening the bolt. And that is what this person does. Tightens the bolts, makes certain that everything gets completely finished. They absolutely, completely live and breathe the completion of a task. They are painstaking. They will actually look for errors where others may be content to let them go. They will polish and they will perfect. But the downside of a completer finisher is they can be completely inclined to worry unduly and sometimes take all of the burdens and workload onto themselves. This can make them inflexible. The ninth and final role was actually a role that was introduced relatively recently. By recently, I meant it wasn't in the original 8 roles, and it's the role of the specialist. Now, a specialist is someone who contributes hugely, but preferably in their own area of expertise. So they are single-minded, self-starting, and dedicated. They're typically strong on knowledge and the skills that are necessary to deliver that knowledge to other people. However, they can contribute just on this front and may dwell on the technicalities of what needs to be done. So they are brilliant experts on a certain situation, but may sometimes not be able to translate this expertise into reliable actions. And there you have the 9 team roles. At this stage, I'll ask again if anybody has any questions on the 9 team roles.
Yeah, just as a reminder, folks, you are muted at the moment. So again, you can key in a question, chat function, or raise your hand and we will unmute you. Thank you.
Okay, Bernard, I'll now ask you to look at the Interplace 7 team group and working relationship reports. For people who are not aware, Interplace 7 is the new way of operating Belbin, and as I said at the start, it is the electronic version of Belbin, so any paper-based versions predate it. And this version really only came into play in 2013. So those of you who may have been accredited prior to that time, from now on, you can work with the new Interplace 7 models. So I'll pass this over to Bernard.
Thank you, John. Well, as John mentioned, this is the new version of the system, the inventory system. And there's been quite significant changes as Belbin changed its inventories. For example, on the self-perception inventory questionnaire, you're moving from 7 sections to 8 sections with 10 statements, so that would be 80 statements. So the inventories have been changed, meaning that the benefit for you guys out there is that the system is you still have your control questions, input filters, which gives you the robustness that we've had, but it's more reliable and validated, if you want to put it this way, through this new inventory in there. On top of this, once you complete a Belbin individual profile now, you'll also receive this with a link to a video, which is quite interesting, describing your preferred team role and the 9 clusters of behaviors that John has identified previously. Yeah. So John, if you can change the slide, the typical, as you can see coming up on the screen here, the typical team reports are still the same. John, okay, thank you. Yeah. So this is a team sample. As the reason I picked that is the majority of the this is a framework, it's a methodology, and the management application for the evaluation of team, from forming to evaluating teams, is where we use it the most. So this is a sample of a team sample, and they're inclusive of the self-perception and observer assessment. Some of you would be familiar with this in the older version, electronic version of eInterplace, where you have from the left to the right the top 3 preferred team roles, the least preferred team roles, and the number of observers. So for example, Dave Blue here has 4 observers, and his overall team role is a plant coordinator, computer finisher, and his least preferred would be 7, 8, and 9 here. So you would have the names of the team roles here. I apologize with that little screen popping up here. Okay, so you would have the different names. John, if you can switch to the next slides, please. Some of these would be much more familiar, but for example, this is a new sample report that they've added, which is the team role circle, which is a great snapshot of where a team or a group of individuals, and we'll come back to that, and the application to forming or evaluating teams and the focus of the work, because again here we're measuring behaviors, as John mentioned. This is not a psychometric test as such, because we're not focusing on personality. We're measuring how people contribute, interrelate, communicate within a working framework in here. So if you look at this team role circle, we could see, for example, that and the social roles, so you have the social, thinking, and action roles in here, that the majority of this team would be in the social and doing roles or action roles, and that although they do have a representation everywhere, so it's quite of a balanced team, you could kind of zoom in on how they take their decisions due to the lack of some of the thinking team roles that they have, etc., etc. So it's a great tool to use. And John, if you can turn to the next slide, please. This is another sample. This is a graphic report showing you in red the average composition of a team, and blue the individual one. A new thing in the eEnterprise 7 is we're measuring percentiles now, and here, so from 0 to 100, and there. So, for example, in this particular sample, we could see that the monitor, evaluator, coordinator, and specialist, so 2 thinking team roles and 1 social team roles, are almost at 100% of the normative database, percentile database that the methodology would use. So that's quite high. At 100%, this is the highest as a percentile in here. Obviously, the average, for example, a complete finisher being at 68% or 70%, let's say, let's round it up, and here, that means there's only 29% of individuals who represent higher characteristics of a complete finisher. So someone who's attentive to details, who likes to finish complete projects, as John was saying, but on the other hand can be a little bit anxious and can be micromanaging a lot, has delegation issues due to the fact that they set the bar quite high. It can be, perfectionist, let's put it this way in here. So by you have about 10 pages and the new eEnterprise 7. So we use this basically as a tool for any management application in terms of evaluating where a group or a team stands, or a system stand between a group and a performing team, and John will cover that in a few minutes in here. So it's just a tool, and the last report, thank you, John. As I mentioned, this is a behavioral assessment. We're measuring behaviors here. We're measuring, these are behavioral-based questions that describes behavioral characteristics which individuals display when working in teams. And what you're seeing here on the screen is the definitions of these clusters. In other words, creative would be a plant characteristic, outgoing would be a resource investigators, etc., etc. And that gives you the number of points. So this report is based on 6 observers, and that's another advantage of Belbin. It's a full 360, so we're using a factual observation in here. So the highest point, for example, could be 12 here. So we know that if 8 points on the plant side, we know that there's a good reliability in here. So that's just a quick snapshot, unless some of the delegates here have questions. And today we have a big diversity of delegates. I mean, I noticed on the registration report, we've got, L&D managers, project managers, HR. So a lot of you would be using this from a team-related point of view. Obviously, we also have executive coaches and consultants who would potentially would want to use this as a added revenue on their own practice. But the majority of you would be using, assuming this, would be interested or using this tool from a team perspective as opposed to individual perspective. Okay, if there's no other comments, I'm going to turn it over to John. So John, over to you now. Thank you. Yeah, John, I'm sorry, you are muted, so no one can hear you, John. You need to unmute yourself, yeah.
At the beginning, I talked about Belbin being much more than a team-building tool. In other words, it's far more important than just talking about having your profile and being able to deliver your profile to other people, to see whether you're a plant or whether you are a resource investigator, or the other many things that you could be. And it's often viewed by people as something like a Swiss Army knife. In other words, there are very many things that you can do once you have the Belbin profile off and running. And we're going to take a look now at some of those factors. Self-awareness and personal effectiveness is one of the most obvious ones, and that's what you pick up because you know yourself. And everybody who knows themselves will be aware of their own strengths and can often compete with their weaknesses. And possibly it's true that many of the weaknesses we have are ways that we can improve performance and guide ourselves to better. So knowing your profile is extremely important. It can be very important, for example, in terms of developing yourself and looking at your career. Even if you have a career that you're qualified for, your behavioral patterns may mean it more likely that you take a certain role in a career. I'm going to throw an example out there. Marketing research is an excellent way of marketing people developing their knowledge. But researchers, by their nature, tend to be more into detail, more into thoroughness and completeness. And when they complete and finish some work, they tend to do it to a far greater extent. Whereas a sales force, for example, will tend to be more shaper or resource investigator. Now, I'm just giving that as examples. If you know yourself, the key thing is that you will be able to know others. So you'll be able to build mutual trust and understanding of other people because you are aware of their roles. You are therefore aware of where they have strengths and to play to them and where they have allowable weaknesses. And a team leader will be able to manage people to a far greater and more effective extent. And of course that starts with team selection and development. If you're recruiting, then you will be able to look not only at the technical qualifications or what we describe as the eligibility of the person for the post, but also the suitability of the post. By that we mean we can help in team selection and development. I should say that we are looking for our next Belbin webinar in early December to do a special training just on recruitment. And keep an eye out for that. We'll be emailing you with details, or you'll see it on our site, www.belbin.ie. So team selection, development, and recruitment, very important. Part of that means matching people to the right jobs. They may be very successful where they are, but how capable will they be of taking on a role which encompasses behaviors that may be either alien to them or very difficult to keep up? What kind of supports will be needed to put into place to make sure that these people can either do the job themselves or find somebody else who can? And which obviously leads to organizational analysis. And that's very important too, because taking a look at the whole team, you look and see how balanced it is and where potentially strengths and weaknesses are. Of course, team building is not just for the team members. Team building is also for the leaders. And management training and development that does not take into account behavior can sometimes enable poor performance to grow, or at the very least, lack of optimization of the potential of the team. So it's just as important for people who are managing people and leading to understand the team as it is for the individuals in the team to know for themselves. So we've broken down how Belbin can be used in an organization.
Sorry, John, there's
several different.
Hello, John. Yeah, there's a question here from Mark that I've just got. So let me read it to you. Can you say, I've heard a little bit about the people matching to jobs. Can you say a little bit more about that in there? Okay. We would normally say, and as I would prelim this by saying that we are having the recruitment one in December. But very simply, how you would look at people by matching people to jobs can come down to the following issues. Firstly, when you advertise a post and you advertise a position, people will tend to do that in technical matters, 20 years experience, knowledge of the industry, etc. What we believe equally important is to look for the job behavior that that person needs. So is this person going to be a leader and has to drive and motivate people, or is this person going to be a supporter and meticulous in their research? And it's really important that when you get into a role that that's known to everybody. You get away from the sort of genuine, I suppose, personnel speak that says person must be a self-starter, etc., and tend to look at precisely what the behaviors will be. Not everybody can be a motivated, driven leader self-starter, and in certain roles you don't need them.
So it's important to understand and to get across to the candidates, the recruitment agencies, or whoever's recruiting on your behalf, what those roles might be. And that should go throughout the recruitment process, from the release of the brief to an agency or an advertiser, to looking at the candidates. And we would argue, prior to them being hired, they should be profiled, because that will tell you the type of person you have who is suitable rather than just eligible for the job. There's a lot more information on matching jobs, plus some job relationship reports available on the www.belbin.ie site. And of course, if you have any questions, Mark, I'd be delighted to talk to you. Okay, Bernard?
Yeah, that's the last one I've seen, so go ahead, John, yeah.
Okay. Okay, fine. Okay. I've just seen one other come up, and I'll come to it in a second, Charlie. Okay, how can it be used in your organization? Okay, first of all, awareness of behavior. I talked about that. Self, interpersonal, and team. Extremely important. Secondly, coaching. Coaching is one of the fastest growing areas of management development. And individual and team coaching, we think, will need a tool to start. And Belbin, we believe, to be an ideal tool, because you can work on developing the individuals and the teams when you have Belbin or the profiling system as a starting point. So if you know your strengths and weaknesses, then good coaches will be able to bring out those strengths and cover for the allowable weaknesses. And that's particularly so, we have found in our experience, in a team dynamics. The third is career development. So if you want to change career or potentially start a new career, one of the key things you would need to learn is how to be able to know yourself. If you're applying for a position that naturally suits your behavioral tendencies, you have a strengthened opportunity of getting it, but more important, developing and flourishing within that role. Change management is the how. How change comes. And change is one of the most complex things we've learned with in Belbin and in our sister company, Zenergy. And in every change management process, people are key. And in every change management process, we insist on profiling the people in the organization so that they know themselves and so that they know their reliability and acceptability of change. Because stubbornness and resistance to change can be seen, and on the other hand, people who may not be the loudest will often be the people who quietly are most in favor of the change and are prepared to adopt it. Belbin can also be used in performance issues. It may very well be clear that one of the reasons that somebody is not strong in a certain area, such as attention to detail, may be coming through in the way that they work. If it's clear that their profile shows that this is an area of weakness, then you know that perhaps the person is doing the best they can, but that this is a weakness that has to be looked at. Bernard talked previously about balanced teams, and that's extremely important. Particularly we find in project management teams, when you have people from different parts of the organization, if it's a large organization, or external people and internal people who have to work together to achieve a certain project. For many multidisciplinary teams, it's extremely important potentially to profile these people so that you see not only what the internal team does, but what the external people can do, to see what they can add and potentially what areas you need to watch out for. Culture is extremely important also. To clarify what the culture is and to look at how to develop it. Recruitment, I've talked about it at some length, and that is going to be one of the fastest growing areas for use of Belbin in the future. But once somebody's in the induction, that's often the first 30 days in an organization in which people can get the fit. And if the people who are inducting them know and understand their profile and how they can be delivered within an organization, it greatly multiplies the chance of for recruiter and recruited being successful. Leadership development is obviously key. I've spoken about the importance of the managers knowing their teams and knowing themselves, and that's absolutely key. If you have a good leadership development program, part of it, we believe, should include the proper profiling of everybody who's a potential or existing leader. Work assignment. People often view Belbin in terms of large projects and large issues, but this is something a lot smaller. You can assign someone a piece of work, for instance, completing a project on time. If they tend to be detail-oriented and methodical, then on the one hand, it probably means they will complete that task. But it can be at the cost of completing that task no matter what. Time schedules may slip. It may be difficult for people to get things delivered because they are perfectionists in nature. And these are people who can sometimes be comfortable with slips in time. For them, computer finishes, for example, it can never be perfect. And even if it goes out and looks all right, there would still be details. And finally, in the area of conflict resolution and mediation, it's absolutely clear that people understand not just the issues themselves, but the behavior that underlines the issues. And a good knowledge of the profiling of every individual in a situation can often bring it to a successful conclusion. So I've just looked at those, and for any of you who have any questions, be a great time to hear them. I have one here from Charlie Boyle, who's been on before, to talk about customer service organisations. And customer service is one of our growing areas. It's a big area in the Irish industrial sector, and we are developing a paper. I'm quite happy to bring you into that, Charlie, which is how customer service organisations can introduce Belbin to get the right strength of teams. It's important in terms of, say, shift work and other such factors. Thanks for that, Charlie, and I'll be in touch with you. Any other questions? Okay. The team performance curve. You want to have a quick look at teams, because the core to Belbin is teams, and it's a really simple way of looking at what a team has. First of all, a lot of teams start out by being groups of individuals. And as time goes by, they in fact believe they're a team, but may actually only be a pseudo-team. And one of the tasks we're often asked to achieve is to help teams perform to their optimum. Typically, at the start of a session, we would ask people where they were on the curve. The curve is written by Katzenbach and Smith and is well known in the industry. Many of the people believe, of course, that they are already a high-performing team and do not need further work. But a more honest assessment for many of them is that they may be a potential team, or maybe even a pseudo-team. They exist in their own silos, but are they really working together to the best performance? And getting people up that performance curve leads Belbin as a potential way of identifying themselves. So, are you a team, or are you just a group? And there are very clear signs that we've looked at over the years that talk about that. The Belbin methodology, for example, would say that a group can be unlimited. Now, we all know the difficulties of getting 15 to 20 people to get a project done, and sometimes you need to work in that group. It's obviously much more effective if a team is limited, and we would say 6 would be an ideal number for a team. It can be less, and sometimes it can be more. But once it gets above 6, it can be difficult. Groups are often randomly chosen, or chosen as representatives. It's critical for a high-performing team to be selected. And in that includes looking at their profiles and where their strengths and weaknesses are. And then there are others down there that I'll leave you to look at. Whether the leadership style is controlling or consultative. Whether the goal is agreed and shared and everybody's driving toward it, or it's a common sense of interest. How decision-making is made. The involvement, be it total or limited. The interaction. Whether behaviour is welcome, behavioural differences are welcome, including viewpoints, or whether points are being scored. And obviously, rather than having a self-reflection on how things are going, it's feedback on the whole team's effectiveness. So that's something we'd be quite happy to explore with individuals either professional coaches or in-house teams.
Yeah, John, I'm just going to come in here if there's any comments so far. I mean, I think what we've just presented, what John just presented, is probably one of the key applications of the team performance curve. And if, you know, are you just a team or just a group? I'm still astonished with our clients, or, you know, in the past years, how much people are unaware, or they think they are a team, but they're actually just a working group of individuals with no common purpose, or they have difficulties in identifying interdependencies within the collective here to make them a real team in there. So a lot of our work, especially in team coaching or systemic team coaching, some of the measurable outputs would be to work with a working group or pseudo team and at least bring them to a potential or real team in here, meaning defining a team charter, so going through what I would define as the micro skills. The framework is the Belbin methodology, or the Katzenbach model, as John O'Boyle has presented. Usually this overlaps with the Tuckman model. Some of you will be familiar with that, of forming, storming, norming, etc., which gives you, you know, specific behavioral characteristics, or where a group of individuals can be at in terms of how they manage conflict, how they trust each other, manage accountability, etc. So a lot of our work would be to, we use the Belbin methodology as a tool and this team performance curve, and try to increase team effectiveness through basically team role theory. In other words, how do you know, we're not measuring, again, personalities here. We're measuring how a team role would fit within a group of individuals or a team, and how can they best contribute, interrelate, communicate in order to have the highest effectiveness and performance of that in there. But the self-awareness of, you know, we're a team, but actually we're a group of individuals is quite an interesting feedback here. And that's all I wanted to mention, John, at that level. So I'll let you, as I'm conscious of time, let you present the Belbin Professional Path. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, the final part of our webinar today talks about how to become a Belbin consultant, and the professional path for Belbin consultants leading to coach education. This is for people who wish to become Belbin consultants as part of a coaching or management development individual practice, or potentially people who wish to bring Belbin into their organization. Some of you listening may already have been qualified in certain parts of it, so I'll go through it fairly quickly and talk through the path in some depth. The first is Belbin Theory Accreditation. That's the accreditation of people to the theory of Belbin as delivered by the Belbin Associates team in the UK. We are the only people in Ireland, north or south, who can deliver accreditation. Accreditation are held frequently throughout the year, and we plan over the next year not only to have them in Dublin and Cork and Galway, but all of the cities. In addition, if you have a team of 4 or 5 who all wish to be accredited, we can look, subject to budget, to visiting your offices and do that. We did that recently in Cork, and we'll be happy to do it again. So we can run our own accreditation in-house if you have 4 to 5 people. At the end of the accreditation, 2 days, you will receive accreditation of your knowledge of theory. Rather than that being the end of the journey, which has happened so often in the past, we believe that's the start of it. So we are offering people the chance to go through a professional path for using Belbin, either in their own work or bringing it within an organization. To look at those individual elements in some detail, we have a train-the-trainer session over 2.5 days that talks about how to bring Belbin into any team intervention. This is delivered by professionals, including Bernard on the call today, who are experts in delivering Belbin within organizations. A full day face-to-face or online is available to do analyzing reports, developmental coaching and feedback skills. If you have the Belbin profile of people, all too often it's likely that the people get the profile, don't receive sufficient feedback from it, don't use it, and therefore it tends to be left on the shelf. That's a total waste of money for the company who've invested in that profile, because the only way you're going to develop it is to get proper feedback and pick up some developmental coaching as a result of it. So that masterclass enables you to look at reports, draw out certain inferences and conclusions, and turn them into practical coaching interventions. I've spoken earlier on about recruitment, and recruitment and team selection is one of the key ways of introducing behavioral profiles such as Belbin into the work environment. I talked also about the fact that a webinar is due in December on that point. But as well as the webinar, we will have an online half-day masterclass which just focuses on the recruitment process and how it can best be done. The fourth section, the Belbin Professional, is the interplace and administration of the projects. It's useful for everyone, but it's particularly useful for those using it within a company, because using the Belbin profiling system may be something that you don't do yourself, and others in your organization tend to do that. And it's important that they understand and can master how to distribute the profile, how to answer the questions, how to be able to feedback correctly both to individuals, observers, or other organizations or teams within the group about the Belbin system, and that's extremely important. We then have a project implementation phase in which we ask people to take a team or a project and attempt to implement Belbin in their organization. Typically that means people take a project away, and about a month or so later they come back and have a review and presentation back. The purpose of that is to ensure that every individual person has a really thorough knowledge of what Belbin is and how it can work. During all of that, we are here to help. So a typical team intervention journey will work pretty much like an intervention of any other development. We'll start by looking at the contracting of the objectives with the stakeholders. Typically, we'll have an introductory webinar where we'll outline exactly how Belbin will work. Questionnaires are then completed online. And then within the team, we have a workshop. The workshop starts by feedbacking on the profiles, the individuals, and the team, and moves on into how to turn that into a team development plan. For team coaches, we have a further in-depth view, which means having looked at the results and developmental needs, we would look at putting together a program for continuous team coaching to help the team move along that curve from being a group to be a fully performing team. Typically, that will take 6 months and is quite in-depth. But if you're really going to show developmental progress in a team, that's the sort of time and investment that's needed to make it work. Of course, these are simple examples of the way it will work, and we're quite happy to tailor something to the requirements of an individual company or coach. But one thing we would say and stress very strongly, if Belbin is going to be used, it's too often used just to get your own profile. And that to us is at best a poor way of using Belbin, and at worst a waste of time. It's absolutely essential that people, having got profiles, are fed back thoroughly and take some action in terms of development. Our next accreditation session for Belbin professional practitioners and potential practitioners will be on November the 20th to the 21st in Galway. There are places available, so please contact us. And then for experienced users, some of you who may already be Belbin accredited or know the system and can refresh it, we're having a practitioner session on the 26th and 27th in Galway. So accreditation for those who are not accredited to Belbin and want to find out more, 20th to 21st, and experienced users 26th to 27th. Places are still available. You can contact us online or call 353-863-04-2185. Any questions? Bill, back to you.
Okay, John, I'm monitoring the chat function here and the questions. Looking in here. Yeah, I can see one from John. So this is quite of a technical question. You've mentioned eInterplace 7. We have in, I can't read this, older version of eInterplace. How do you upgrade, and what is the path to upgrade, basically? So, well, John, to answer that question, it's a technical question. Just briefly, I'm not going to go into too much details. The E7, first of all, is a cloud application, so you don't necessarily download a client software now anymore. And where you need to come back to us is should you wish to import your current database of Belbin profiling into the new system. So there's a bit of discussion to be completed here between us and obviously with the technical support of Belbin Associates UK in here. So great question. We get those quite a lot here. And as Belbin Ireland, one of our tasks is obviously to support the install base of clients on the island. So please do come back to us if you have any specific technical questions regarding the upgrade path in here.
Yeah, it is technical, and I agree, but it is also relatively simple to resolve in that once you have an account, that account is yours, and you can assign lives to it, or we call profile lives to it. It's a simple question of either paying over online or direct to someone. You will get an account with a number of profiles and lives in. You can email out the forms to everybody. They fill them in, put them into the system. The system will actually do its magic. It will produce reports, both individual and team reports. So that's very easily achieved, and people within our office or online can help you with that. The key, as I said, is having got that, to do something with it. And too often people get the profiles, believe that that's it, it's finished. As I mentioned again, that's just the start. Once you have your profile, it's then what you do with it. But the interplace system, as Bernard said, is actually markedly simpler and all done online. So any information technical support, just let us know.
Yeah, and everything is done online, and you can use your past database to import into the new system. So just contact us. Okay, John, I don't see any more questions. I think we've hit the hour here. So, folks,